reviving civic education in our young people, to teach them to be proud of our country and our state rather than ashamed of it. They deserve it. That means getting rid of the woke indoctrination and the victimhood psychology with actual U.S. history and actual civics lessons that teach them to be proud, teach them what it means to be an American. Say the Pledge of Allegiance in every school in this state with a moment of silence every morning. That's what's going to happen in the public schools on my watch. And every high school senior who graduates from an Ohio high school on my watch will have to pass the same civics test that every legal immigrant has to pass in order to become a naturalized citizen of this country. You got to know something about the country in order to respect the country and love the country. And that's the job of K through 12 education. After we light that fire under the feet of our public schools, that lays the foundation for then taking higher education to the next level.
So Josh, the idea of making civics tests a standardized process to essentially graduate high school, in theory, is not a terrible idea. But what it does is it undermines what it means to be American. And in the process, this idea that Vivek has, that is the idea that America is an idea, is wrong. It's quite simply wrong. And
yes, I want to say, were you about to pull something up?
No,
okay,
go ahead.
I was going to say this real quick. This is a perfect opportunity for a lesson in, like, I don't know what you would call it, like cadence or double standards. It's like, and I'll give an example of what I mean. I saw a bit like by a comedian who's this Italian guy. And he was talking, he's like, hey, Italians, you know, like, he was doing a bit about like food, how Italians make better food than people. But it was like in jest. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, it was a joke. Then I saw a black comedian, and he was talking about how like white people don't season their food. And I don't have the clips or anything to go off of, but like you can kind of tell that there's a jest in one and malice in the other, and under the guise of a joke. And so this is a perfect example of that, where someone like you and I, we would actually, and I've talked about this before, we would actually be okay with Americans having to, have some basic like civics understanding, more than is required by today's education, the education system. We would be okay with that. But when Vivek demands that, when Vivek promises that, why does he want that? And think about what he said in the clip. He said the Americans have to pass the same civics test that the legal immigrants have to do. Why does Vivek care about that? Because I think he was born here, but like his parents,
he's an anchor baby.
He's an anchor baby. Yeah, his parents were legal immigrants.
There's a little conflict of interest there.
Yes, because he does not view himself the same way. Like, look at the people behind him in that video. What qualifies Vivek Ramaswamy, who just got here? I mean, in an ancestral sense, who just got here, whose ancestors are not tied to this land. He's going to tell the people of Ohio how to be. He's going to tell them what the problem is. He's going to be the one dictating their governance in Ohio. We made the example before about Ilhan Omar. Why is there's someone in Ohio right now who can trace their ancestry back to the inception of it as a state. And some guy who got here who was born in the 70s or probably
something like that,
like the 80s, is going to tell him what to do, is going to tell him what it is to be an American.
Yeah. Well, what Vivek doesn't understand is that these ideas that he's pushing come from what he argues is blood and soil. Sorry, he is arguing that the ideas are separate from blood and soil, but they aren't. They quite literally aren't, because we've tried it. We've tried to export democracy. We've tried to export these ideas to other countries, and it fails every single time. Why? Quite simply because the people of this country hold these ideas and push these ideas forward. And if we simply take it and replace the people the ideas are replaced because they are one and the same. You cannot bring a people up under an idea because it is that idea. People are not interchangeable cogs in the machine. Economically, ideally, philosophically, even religiously. I mean, we have different traditions. And that's what it all boils down to, is that he has a conflict of interest that he is going to push in Ohio and continue to push until he gets what he wants, where anyone and everyone can be an American because we are a land of multiculturalism. And because of that, he's quite simply pushing globalism under a different banner.
And I want to say this about Vivek Ramaswamy, because I see someone in our live chat. Thank you for commenting, by the way. But I'm not sure if she's referring to what you just said about him. She said, I can't blame him. And I'm not exactly the point.
I don't blame him either. But that
I do.
No, if I was in his position, I would argue the same thing.
Well, of course.
Because it's in his interest to do that.
But that is my point. And what I want to say is I can't blame him is like, yes, you know, that's something when I talk about Israel at my other job, they say like, well, that's what I would be doing if I were an Israeli national here. It's like, yeah, me too. I get why they're doing it, but that doesn't negate the fact that it is not in my interest. It is not in our interest. We need to look out for ourselves. We need to stop worrying about like the common good of all humanity, because all humanity is made up of different people who care about themselves. And so I want to say this about I can't blame him comment. Again, I'm not attacking you. I think you actually it's a good point to bring up, because this is the real problem. Is the idea, the narrative about what a nation is. I don't know if you don't have the tweet you said.
Which tweet?
The one in the two where he said there's most nations are anyway. But he basically said in a tweet, and we can get it here in a second. So you know I'm not making it up, but he basically said in a tweet, there's two ideas of what there's two things that make a nation. There's nation A, which is something like blood, soil, and heritage, and then like hypothetical nation 2 is like ideas and social constructs and whatnot. And he says that's what makes America great. That's what America is. America is not tied to the blood of its founders. It's not tied to the soil. It's tied to the ideals of Thomas Jefferson and all that kind of bullshit. And basically, he has to say that because, yeah, perfect. Heritage, blood, soil, ideals, allegiance, and duty. That's what makes American exceptionalism possible. No. American exceptionalism is not importing every Indian possible in here to be a coder. That's not what American exceptionalism is. American exceptionalism came from the fact that it was quite literally some of the most adventurous people from Europe trying to create a better life for themselves, which they did. All over the world, you know, the whole of the Americas, South America and North America, was colonized by all sorts of European countries. But the United States of America came out on top because these were the best people. They were the best. They were exceptional. And American exceptionalism is not just someone who just got here who has citizenship. And that's why they whoever they is, it can be Indians, it can be Chinese, it can be whoever. But it's this idea of a meritocracy where what makes you a great American is how high of a test score you have, how much money you can accrue. The American dream is how big of a house you can afford. That's not what the American dream is. That's not what that's not what the founders intended.
The American dream has changed over time, but I just want to point out a definition error. He says most nations are built around number 1, heritage, blood, and soul. And number 2 being ideals, allegiance, and duty. By definition, a nation can only be heritage, blood, and soul. Anything else is a country. We are a country. We are not a nation. A nation is a people with a shared heritage, a shared ethnicity, and a nation is quite simply an extended family. And so,
right, it derives from the word natal.
Yes. And by definition, anything else, if you put boundaries around a land and call it a thing, it is a country. But a nation requires a people.